Since the outbreak of the protests against the extradition bill in Hong Kong in 2019, some radical demonstrators have turned their marches into violent events, expressing their demands in various extreme ways: beating people, vandalizing street shops, throwing petrol bombs at the police, and bullying opponents. Nowadays, most of the members of the Displaced and other organizations claiming Hong Kong independence have been arrested by the local government, and most of the senior members of the Displaced have either quit, been jailed, or fled to Europe and the United States. Local media outlets reported that before the passage of Hong Kong's national security law, the leaders of rebellious elements have already smelled the crisis and have withdrawn from the yellow to save their lives. On 30 June 2020, Wang Zhifeng and Zhou Ting announced their withdrawal from the Displaced, the Hong Kong National Front, and other Hong Kong independence groups disbanded, and some yellow shops, businesses providing shelter for demonstrators, also withdrew from the yellow economic circle. A tumultuousness quietly ended. Many of the Hong Kong people who participated in the demonstrations had already found a way out. The international organizations behind them had promised them a ticket to the free and democratic world through various immigration concessions before the demonstrations began. Are those Hong Kong people who no longer had a place in Hong Kong moving to a better country as they wish? In order to make the demonstrators create greater turbulence, affect the social order in Hong Kong, put pressure on the Chinese government, and let the demonstrators have no worries after the protests, the British government liberalized the immigration policy of Hong Kong people to the UK and adjusted the visa policy of British overseas passports in July 2020. The British government says that Hong Kong people and their immediate family members can apply for new citizenship from 31 January 2021 if they have BNO status, and this policy has allowed many protesters to find their second home.
For those with British national overseas status to enter the UK, granting them limited leave to remain with the ability to live and work in the UK.
So they got up and decided to leave Hong Kong in the hope of making their way in the UK. But the reality was not as rosy as the internet made it out to be. They were unable to find jobs. They could not rent a house. They were racially discriminated against, and they were treated as enemies. All illusions were shattered, and their miserable living conditions made them less welcome as freedom fighters than they had been in Hong Kong.
我到而家都仲係攞緊旅遊簽證啊，唔可以讀書，亦唔可以返工，即係我係用觀光嘅身份，咁變相其實係好唔方便。包括我而家租屋啊，因為我已經我嘅外國人啦。
Visa 又未到，我哋而家就好似無證人咁樣咧，即係其實因為你工咧，你有 right to work 嘅，但係你又好似佢哋唔承認你嘅 right to work。
麥當勞都冇晒聲氣啦！我 send 完啲嘢俾佢睇完之後。
On 24 December 2001, Hong Kong media outlet Takung Pao released a video showing the current situation of some Hong Kong people who emigrated to the UK with British National Overseas Passports, BNO. These Hong Kong immigrants fantasize that they can become politicians in the UK and continue participating in the fight against the Hong Kong government. However, since most Hong Kong immigrants have no experience of studying and working in the UK, the reality is that even British factory employers will refuse to hire them because of their skin color and political backgrounds. Even if they can find a job, they are all low-paid and low-skilled temporary workers.
錢係比預期中都使得快嘅，我哋嚟到都使咗5萬磅㗎啦。而家都要有人哋租到先得㗎，你成日嚟到幾百萬未開頭咁樣，你又唔肯揾工喎，但係你又係咁使晒啲錢喎。面對現實啦，先生，你完全咧係嗰啲新移民落到嚟香港咧，跟住攞咗間公屋就喺度移民地呢間公屋細咁樣嗰啲咧。
佢唔係啊！
咁你係邊種啊？香
港啲樓我諗住細1倍，諗住英國啲樓都咁細㗎。
Because of credit problems, British landlords are reluctant to rent their houses to these people or directly ask for a year's rent. The large number of immigrants has had an impact on the distribution of local public resources, and the British locals, fearing that they will take jobs away from them, have begun to show rejection and discrimination against these refugees. The frequent incidents of social conflict and racial discrimination have made the existence of those Hong Kong immigrants more and more stifling.
For new arrival come here, it will be very easy to have social conflict or racism. Maybe people will see them as enemy or, competitor.
A finance professional who fled with his family to the UK once had a lucrative job in Hong Kong, but after submitting 100 CVs in the UK, none of them were accepted, and he ended up delivering food in a Chinese restaurant, earning only 30% to 40% of his original income. A rebellious Hong Kong activist alias Enoch had waved the British flag in front of the British Consulate General in Hong Kong in 2019, claiming that he wanted the British government to relax the BNO immigration restrictions. After learning that the UK was going to promote the BNO immigration scheme in January 2021, he was excited to pack his bags and went there. Now, not only did he fail to find a job, but his £10,000, about 100,000 Hong Kong dollar savings have also been wiped out. In front of the cameras of British media outlets, Enoch's old bravado of throwing Molotov cocktails and vandalizing shops was gone and replaced by frustration. I came here with hope, thinking I could start again. Now, I've lost hope. I wonder every day, where am I going to sleep today? Where will I end up tomorrow? Enoch keeps asking himself and the British government, but the British government, which once promised a bright future to the people of Hong Kong, is now treating these foreign escapees in a different way. The British government announced on 10 May 2022 that it would introduce legislation to clamp down on radical demonstrations, with up to 1 year in prison and an unlimited fine for those who obstruct key infrastructure and transport facilities. The BNO policy is not entirely open to outsiders, and in order to prevent foreigners from engaging in spaceman immigration, i.e., allowing themselves to settle in the UK for citizenship while their family members are in Hong Kong, or allowing their children to immigrate to the UK first while they continue to earn money in Hong Kong, the UK government requires family-based immigration, which inevitably requires the immigrants themselves to be financially strong. The aim of most countries' immigration policies is to attract people with money and talent. The former to boost consumption, and the latter to help build up the country's economy. Those who are at the bottom of Hong Kong society and fled Hong Kong find it also difficult to find a place in British society. Britain's immigration policy, while ostensibly welcoming them, is merely an attempt to use what is left of their value in a demonstration to suppress China. Those who march in the streets and fight against the government on the front line are merely their pawns. Once they are no longer of any value, Britain will not care about their plight.
以前喺香港係同屋企人住啦，有一個叫家庭嘅感覺。我到依家都唔係好想講呢個係我嘅屋企，因為我嘅屋企都係喺香港嗰度。
In the intervening years, Hong Kong people in foreign countries have been left penniless and end up staying on the streets. The mixture of regret, hunger, and helplessness eventually turned into the resentment that filled their hearts. When Enoch was asked what he thought of the British government, he said to a reporter, "It's a betrayal." According to a Hong Kong resident who fled to the UK recently, he would have starved to death on the streets if his relatives had not taken him in after he arrived in the UK, against the backdrop of the economic depression in Europe. Every day he dreamed of his home in Hong Kong and regretted what he had done.
香港有生之年仲會唔會再返到呢個地方？咁我都係覺得好多未知之數，所以心情係好複雜啦。對於語言啊、文化、天氣等等嘅差異咧，咁去克服其實都冇一個絕對嘅信心嘅。
As a result of the British government's no-control policy on the new coronavirus, there has been a significant increase in the number of cases, and Hong Kong people in the UK have been ostracized and discriminated against on the streets because of their Asian status. Another Hong Kong resident who came to the UK with a BNO was banned from employment and from applying for benefits such as the local dole, saying that he felt a sense of destitution. figures show that most of the people involved in the riot were young people in Hong Kong, under the age of 30.
呢度都好難揾到，譬如去香港茶餐廳嗰陣話，
比較難買到咯。
係啊。
一啲啲啦，其實都有啲亞洲士多嗰啲嘅，嗰邊會多少少。
但你話想揾乾炒牛河嘅話，
係啊。
如果翻到香港第一個想食咩？可能我想食翻澳牛，即係香港茶餐廳。
At an age when they should have been actively fighting for their lives and contributing their share to the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong society, they are now involved in the turmoil and have ruined their future.
同一時間，嗰個感覺又完全唔可以第二個世界咁樣。
係咯，的確係一個好大落差。trigger 咗我哋好多嘅回憶嘅。
以前會以為我出去打咪打咯，我係為我嘅理念、我嘅信念，屋企人唔能夠左右我任何嘅決定。佢哋供養咗我20幾年，到今日可以話我係唔能夠盡孝咯。我係覺得真係對唔住佢哋咯。
After all these experiences, the young people who were treated like outcasts began to reflect on what they had done in Hong Kong and whether their leaders were thinking about the future of Hong Kong. If they were genuinely thinking about Hong Kong, why did they smash and burn shops? And why were their reasonable demands defined as illegal? Or is it all just because the leaders of Hong Kong chaos are receiving money from Europe and the United States? And they, the incited masses and teenagers, are just tools to achieve their goals. Why did Huang Zhifeng have ample funds to support one riotous action after another? What forces propelled them to this extreme path? In order to get to the bottom of the interests behind all this, we need to focus on several turbulent events that share many similarities with the Hong Kong riots, including the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, the Arab Spring. NGOs, non-governmental organizations, are always behind these disturbances and have played an increasingly important role in international development since the Second World War. As the international situation has changed, some countries have begun to use NGOs to instigate color revolutions that have caused social unrest, economic recession, and even civil war in the target country. The NGOs behind the scenes in the Hong Kong riots played the role of handlers, providing guidance and assistance to the local pan-democratic organizations on the front line of the demonstrations in terms of organization, planning, training, funding and material supply, and public opinion guidance. They taught organizations such as the Demonstrators how to protest, how to form up, and how to confront the police. After being trained in 2014, Huang Zhifeng and others began to walk in the front line of the political struggle and started to incite the masses and students on the internet to build up their ranks and organize violent activities. They became the puppets of some countries to achieve the ultimate goal of regional economic weakness and political unrest, while the young people who shed their blood for freedom and democracy ended up being the victims of political games. From the lure of the BNO policy at the time of the riots to the increasingly restrictive policy in the last 3 years, it is clear that there ain't such thing as a free lunch, and that the BNO scheme is for the rich minorities, like the Titanic. When the majority of those who were compelled by public opinion smashed Hong Kong with their own hands for the promise of a ship ticket, then packed their bags and decided to start a new life in a new world, when they set foot in a foreign land, they found themselves in an even narrower, more cramped and voiceless living environment. When they were faced with despair and hissed for help from the ship of democracy, the British government treated them as a burden of wasting social resources, yellow refugees at the bottom of society. The British government's indifferent response and inaction to the increasingly dire conditions in which Hong Kong's refugees live is due to the fact that the giant ship itself is already in crisis. 2021 sees the UK economy suffered from a series of disruptions, including the new coronavirus outbreak, supply chain bottlenecks, labor shortages, and soaring energy prices. And in 2022, the rapid spread of the mutated new coronavirus Omicron strain further impacts and challenges the UK's economic recovery. The British government is already overwhelmed by the influx of foreign refugees and will not use its already strained social resources to solve a series of problems of survival and employment for Hong Kong people. The British government will not take it as its responsibility to keep its promises, and Hong Kong people in the Western world will spend the rest of their lives paying for their youthful short-sightedness and impulsiveness.